My child, this moment carries more weight than you realize. I need you to slow down before the noise around you convinces you to move on, because what I am about to tell you matters deeply. Very few people will remain long enough to hear these words, and many will keep scrolling, believing they can come back another time. Yet you stopped, and that pause matters. Your life depends on receiving this message. Not because I want to frighten you, but because what you understand today will shape the direction of every step you take from here. You believe victory should be obvious, celebrated, and impossible to miss. But the victory I am speaking about unfolded quietly, away from applause, in places where only I saw what you carried. If you walk away now, you will leave behind an understanding I preserved your life for. I will never abandon you, but truth can be ignored, and when understanding is ignored, confusion always finds its way back. The fact that you are here does not place you above anyone else. It simply tells me your heart has become ready to receive what many are still too weary, distracted, guarded, or afraid to face. Something within you recognized that these words carried weight before you could explain why. I watched you stop. I saw the quiet hesitation before you chose to stay, and I know that choice was not random. So listen carefully, because I speak to you with both love and truth. Your life depends on hearing this, not because danger is waiting around the corner, but because clarity changes the path ahead. I am not asking you to stay so I can control you. I am asking because you survived what was meant to end you, and before you move forward, you need to understand why. You have called it survival. You have called it luck. You have called it endurance. But you have never truly called it victory, because while you were living through the battle, you could only feel its weight. You remember the pressure, the exhaustion, the confusion, yet you never saw how many edges I kept you from reaching. There were moments when everything could have turned much darker. There were moments when giving up would have seemed completely reasonable, and still I remained with you. This is serious because you came closer than you know. There were seasons when your heart carried more than you admitted, and thoughts you never found the words to speak aloud. I remember the nights when you whispered to yourself, "Just make it through one more day." You thought everyone lived that way, but what you walked through was far from ordinary. It was a narrow road where many lose themselves, their hope, and their sense of purpose. Yet here you are, still listening, still willing to hear me, and that is no accident. You won because you refused to become someone you were never created to be. You won because bitterness never took root, even when disappointment offered every reason for it to grow. You won because you held on to truth when comfort would have been easier to choose. You won because you remained present in your own life, instead of disappearing behind numbness. No crowd applauded those decisions, and few people ever noticed them, but those quiet choices are the reason you are still standing today. Only a few will truly understand this, because many never stop long enough to ask why they survived. They hurry back into distraction, routine, and constant noise because reflection asks difficult questions, and those questions lead to responsibility. Reflection changes the way a person lives, and that is why so many avoid it. But you paused, you stayed. Even now you are still here, and that tells me you are ready to understand what this moment truly means. Your life depends on this message because clarity changes direction. Without it, you would continue carrying yesterday's fear, yesterday's doubts, and yesterday's misunderstandings into tomorrow. You might mistake your next season for another battle when the greatest battle has already passed. I will not allow you to keep living under that burden after everything you have endured. You survived what was meant to end you, not because you were invincible, but because I protected you. There were boundaries you never saw because I placed them there. There were moments when unseen protection interrupted what could have caused years of pain. There were times I slowed your steps because rushing ahead would have led you into harm. You called some of those moments delay. I knew they were protection. My care rarely announces itself with noise. Often it leaves you alive, changed, and quietly wondering why everything feels different. Now that you have won, the way you live must also change. That change does not come through fear, and it is not about performance. It begins with awareness. Victory carries responsibility, not the burden of proving yourself, but the responsibility to live honestly. Stop minimizing what you survived. Stop telling yourself it was insignificant. Stop walking as though you are still trapped in danger when you are standing in a place I have brought you safely through. Say, "My soul is yours, God, forever," if you live for His glory. Most people will ignore these words because it feels easier to believe life is random than to accept that survival carries meaning. Meaning asks you to pay attention. Meaning invites you to slow down. Meaning calls you to choose differently. Many people stay busy because awareness feels costly, but you remained here. That is why this message is for you. I want you to hear me before you move forward, because movement without understanding often repeats what should have ended. Without this understanding, you could find yourself walking through familiar struggles, wondering why the same emotions return, why peace still seems delayed, or why something inside never feels complete. This message brings a chapter to its close, even if you never had words for what you were carrying. Your victory did not arrive with celebration. It looked like endurance. It looked like restraint. It looked like washing your face after tears and choosing to live one more day in a season that tried to harden your heart. It looked like honesty when pretending would have been easier. That is why only a few recognize this kind of victory. Many mistake victory for success, while far fewer recognize it as preservation. I did not protect you so you could return to living without awareness. I did not bring you through that season so you could reduce it to something small. I preserved you because what lies ahead requires the depth that has been formed within you. Do not rush past this moment. Stay with me. You deserve to understand that what you called survival was, in truth, a quiet triumph. You deserve to know the strength you carry was formed through what you endured, not imagined in easier days. Walk forward with confidence instead of uncertainty. Walk knowing you no longer have to brace yourself for collapse or stumble through life, guessing where you stand. Moments like this are rare because true awareness is rare. Many people spend their entire lives without ever understanding why they survived what they survived. They move on without allowing those seasons to shape them with wisdom. I am not allowing that to happen to you. You stopped for a reason. You are still here for a reason. What you understand today will change the choices you make tomorrow. It will change what you accept, how you see yourself, and the way you step into the future, not with dramatic noise, but with quiet, steady, lasting depth. Stay with me a little longer. Let the weight of these words settle gently into your heart, not as fear, but as reverence for everything you have already come through. You have won, and before you take another step, I want you to understand what that victory truly means. This matters because you were never meant to still be here by chance, by luck, or by your own strength alone. Listen carefully, because your survival has been so quiet that you almost convinced yourself it was ordinary. You told yourself you were simply strong enough, careful enough, or fortunate enough to make it through. Yet there were moments when your story could have turned in a completely different direction. There were burdens heavy enough to crush you and days when despair stood far closer than you ever admitted. You are here because I protected you, not because you passed through life untouched. There were dangers you never saw because they never reached you. There were roads you never traveled because I slowed your steps, and decisions that unfolded later because the right time had not yet come. You called those moments coincidence. You thought they were simply part of life, but I was quietly setting boundaries around you, limiting what could touch you, and holding back what would have taken more than you could afford to lose. You came closer to emotional collapse than you like to remember. There were seasons when your heart felt fragile, when weariness lived beneath the strength everyone else admired. You carried yourself through each day with routine and responsibility, telling yourself to keep going and to make as little of it as possible. You endured in silence because you believed that was what strength looked like. But I saw what no one else could see. I remember the nights when your thoughts would not become still and rest felt out of reach. I remember the mornings when you woke up already exhausted before the day had even begun. I remember the moments when giving up would have seemed understandable. Even when your words failed, your silence reached me, and I never looked away. If this message has encouraged you, and you would like to help share messages that point people toward hope and devotion to God, you can support this work through the QR code or support link provided in the description. You were fighting battles you did not even have words to describe. They were rarely dramatic, and they did not always arrive as obvious crises. Sometimes they came through slow erosion, constant pressure, or quiet doubts that gradually chipped away at your sense of purpose. Sometimes they appeared as loneliness, misunderstanding, or the feeling that you were carrying far more than anyone realized. None of those moments were meaningless. There were seasons when your endurance was tested, your identity was challenged, and your hope was stretched. Many of those battles were spiritual, though you did not recognize them at the time. The attacks were not always loud. Sometimes they looked like numbness. Sometimes they felt like discouragement that had no clear explanation. Sometimes they whispered that your life mattered less than someone else's, that your efforts were too small, or that your survival was nothing extraordinary. Those thoughts were never harmless. They were meant to wear you down little by little until you questioned the value of simply remaining. If everything had been left to chance, you would never have been standing here today. One decision could have led to years of pain. Certain relationships could have consumed you. Some paths appeared promising while quietly emptying your soul. There were days when despair tried to persuade you that nothing was worth holding on to. You were kept from those outcomes, not because you were wiser or stronger than everyone else, but because I intervened in quiet ways. I shielded you from choices you were not ready to make. I led you away from places that would have wounded something precious within you. I even allowed discomfort to move you away from what felt familiar, because familiar was no longer safe. What you experienced as interruption was often my protection. What felt like loss sometimes became the very thing that preserved you. You learned how to function while carrying pain. You learned how to smile even when your heart felt empty. And you learned how to keep moving while everything inside you felt uncertain. Those survival habits helped you endure, but they also hid how close you had come to the edge. I saw that edge. I knew how narrow the distance was between continuing and collapsing, and I stayed beside you through every step. There were times when life suddenly slowed down. Plans unraveled. Doors closed. Momentum disappeared without explanation, and you wondered if you had failed. Yet those pauses became barriers of protection. Moving faster would have cost you more than you could see at the time. Slowing your journey kept you from entering places that would have demanded more than you were able to carry. That is why this message carries such urgency. You can no longer keep telling yourself that what you survived was insignificant. When you minimize your survival, you begin treating lightly the life that was preserved. You did not simply endure difficult seasons. You were kept through them. That preservation carries responsibility, not the pressure to perform, but the invitation to live with awareness. You were never spared because you were perfect. You were spared because your life carries great value. What you are becoming matters. Losing you would have meant losing something that cannot be replaced. You are not interchangeable, and you are not disposable. The very fact that you are still here is evidence that your life has been held with deliberate care. There were unseen hands guiding you through moments when you believed you were completely alone. There were limits placed on how far despair could reach into your heart, and there were thoughts that never found a permanent home because I stopped them before they could settle. You only know the story as you lived it. You cannot see how many darker endings were interrupted before they ever became your reality. For a long time you believed your own strength was the reason you survived. Your strength mattered, but it cannot explain everything. There were days when your strength had already run out, yet somehow you kept moving. There were days when courage felt absent, and still you remained. There were days when hope seemed almost gone, and yet you did not disappear. That was never an accident. This matters because now that you are here, you must understand why your life was preserved. The reason is not loud or dramatic. It does not call for fear or constant urgency. It calls you into awareness. You cannot keep living as though you are still trapped in the fight, when the battle that once threatened your life has already been restrained. I protected more than your future. I protected your heart from becoming hardened by pain. I protected your compassion when bitterness seemed justified. I guarded what was most precious within you again and again. Those moments of protection were not random. They were intentional. They were sustained, and they mattered. I speak to you with this kind of seriousness because understanding your survival changes the way you live. It changes what you allow into your life, how you care for yourself, and how you value the life I have entrusted to you. You are not here by accident. You are here with purpose. There were crossroads where your story could have unfolded very differently, and more than once you were slowed down, redirected, or unsettled, just enough to stop before stepping somewhere that would have wounded you more deeply. You may never know every detail of what I protected you from, and you do not need to. The truth is worthy of your trust even without every explanation. That is why this message carries urgency. Awareness must come before your next step. If you continue treating your survival as something ordinary, you may return to places and patterns that once threatened your peace, not because you lack strength, but because forgetting can quietly make anyone careless. You were never meant to still be standing if every burden had been allowed to crush you. You were never meant to still be here if despair had been given the final word. You were never meant to survive if every attack had reached its full purpose. You are here because you were protected. So stop calling it luck. Stop calling it coincidence. Stop believing that anyone would have walked away from those same battles unchanged. Many did not. Many do not. Your life matters. I am not speaking this way to fill you with fear. I want these words to steady your heart. I want you to honor the life you have been given and recognize that being preserved calls you toward purpose rather than pressure. Purpose always begins with understanding, and understanding begins when you finally see your story through my eyes instead of your own. You are still here because I guarded you when you did not even know you needed guarding. I steadied you when your footing was uncertain. I limited the damage when you were most vulnerable. I carried you through moments that would have overwhelmed you on your own. Now that you know this, you no longer have to question whether your life matters. You no longer need to dismiss your endurance as something small or rush past everything you survived, as though it meant nothing. This is why I ask you to pay attention. Your life was spared, and that truth deserves to remain with you. Carry it with reverence, not with fear. Remember that you were never forgotten, never overlooked, and never abandoned. You were protected, and before you move forward, I want that truth to become part of the way you see yourself. You won a battle you did not even realize you were fighting. I say that carefully because when you hear the word battle, you naturally imagine something loud, obvious, and impossible to miss. But the war you endured came quietly. It worked through relentless thoughts, through exhaustion that never seemed to leave, and through pressure that settled over your days so gradually that you almost accepted it as normal. Because it was so quiet, you underestimated what was happening. You thought you were simply tired. You thought you were only carrying stress. You believed life had simply become difficult. Yet there was more taking place than you could see. Type Jesus. You are my constant hope. If his faithfulness continues to sustain you. You were fighting for your identity. The attacks did not begin by telling you to give up. They began by asking questions about your worth, your purpose, and whether your life truly mattered. Little by little, those questions tried to become conclusions. They tried to persuade you that you had fallen behind, that you could be replaced, and that your presence made little difference. Those thoughts were never random. They were meant to slowly erode the truth of who you are. You were also in a battle for hope. It was rarely dramatic. More often it came through long delays, unanswered prayers, and watching others move forward while you felt as though you remained in the same place. Repeated disappointments whispered that expecting change was pointless. You felt that temptation. You felt the desire to expect less simply to protect yourself from more hurt. Yet something within you refused to completely let go. You were fighting for your faith, not merely your beliefs, but your trust in my presence. Silence tested you. Waiting tested you. The absence of clear answers tested you. You wondered whether faith was supposed to feel this quiet and this heavy. You questioned whether continuing to trust still made sense when understanding seemed so far away. Those questions were never proof that your faith had failed. They became the very place where your faith grew from assumption into endurance. You were also in a battle against weariness itself. The goal was never only to make you fall all at once. It was to slowly drain your strength until continuing felt meaningless, until reflection stopped, hope faded, and giving up seemed like the only path to rest. Weariness is powerful because it convinces the heart that surrendering is the only escape. You felt that weight deeply, and still you remained. Your victory did not look the way you imagined it would. It did not arrive as success, applause, or dramatic resolution. It looked like waking up when every part of you wanted to stay down. It looked like showing up when motivation had disappeared. It looked like choosing honesty instead of pretending everything was fine. It looked like refusing to let bitterness become your identity. That is no small thing. That is victory. You did not realize you were winning because you expected victory to feel louder than it does. You expected celebration. You expected immediate relief. You expected the battle to end in a way that everyone could recognize. But battles like this often end quietly. They end when the lies begin to lose their power, even if they still try to speak. They end when every passing thought no longer defines you. They end when you are still standing, still open, and still alive within. There were battles for your identity that arrived through comparison. You looked at other people's lives and wondered why their path seemed smoother, clearer, or farther ahead than yours. You questioned whether you had missed something or taken a wrong turn. Comparison quietly tried to persuade you that you lacked what everyone else seemed to have. But its purpose was never to reveal truth. It was meant to pull your eyes away from the work I was doing within you. You did not surrender to those lies. You wrestled with them, questioned them, and refused to let them become your identity. That quiet resistance mattered more than you realized. There were also battles against your sense of purpose. You wondered whether your efforts made any difference at all. There were moments when you asked yourself if anyone would notice if you simply stopped trying. Those thoughts carried more weight than you understood, because they were pulling at your connection to purpose. Even when meaning felt distant, you kept choosing integrity. You continued to care when caring felt costly, and you continued to choose kindness when no one seemed to notice. That was part of your victory. Some battles came through numbness. There were seasons when your emotions felt far away, when joy seemed muted, and when you felt strangely disconnected from your own heart. Sometimes numbness was your mind trying to protect you from carrying more than it could bear. Yet numbness can also become a place where a person slowly stops engaging with life. You did not remain there. You recognized something was happening. You searched for understanding instead of disappearing into endless distraction, and that awareness kept you from being consumed by it. You were also fighting a battle for patience. Waiting stretched you in ways you never expected. The absence of clear answers tested you. The unknown timeline tested you. You longed to know when things would finally change, when clarity would come, and when relief would arrive. Yet patience is more than simply waiting. It is endurance that continues to trust while the answers remain unseen. You endured without allowing your heart to grow hard, and that is something precious. There was another battle over what strength truly means. Quietly, you were tempted to believe that strength meant never asking for help, never feeling weary, and never admitting uncertainty. But through those difficult seasons, you discovered a deeper kind of strength. You learned that honesty is stronger than pretending. You learned that acknowledging your struggles while continuing to move forward is wisdom, not failure. You learned to respect your limits without surrendering your hope. You did not always feel courageous. There were days when fear felt close, when uncertainty surrounded you, and when simply making it through another day seemed like more than enough. Courage was never the absence of those feelings. Courage was your decision to remain present even while carrying them. You stayed engaged with your life. You kept showing up. You refused to disappear into hopelessness. Those repeated choices, made one day at a time, are what win battles like these. So stop diminishing what you have lived through. Stop telling yourself it was only another difficult season, or believing that everyone experiences it in the same way. Many people come through suffering with hearts that have grown bitter, closed, or disconnected. You were wounded. You were weary, but you were not destroyed. That is part of the victory I want you to recognize. You were never left to fight alone. There were boundaries placed around your life that you could not see. There were limits on how far those attacks could go, because I was guarding what mattered most. I was protecting your heart, your identity, and your ability to keep hoping even when hope felt fragile. The battle tried to make you disappear quietly, not from the world around you, but from within yourself. It wanted you to become indifferent, detached, and numb. Yet you remained present. You continued to feel, to reflect, and to stay aware. That quiet presence carried you farther than you know. You won because you refused to give up on yourself. You won because you held on to truth when it would have been easier to let go. You won because you did not allow exhaustion to decide the direction of your life. You stayed long enough for growth to take place, even when you could not yet see it. Victory does not always arrive as overwhelming relief. Sometimes it comes as a peaceful steadiness after chaos. Sometimes it feels like taking a full breath without realizing how long you had been holding it. Sometimes understanding arrives only after the hardest season has already passed. Now you are beginning to see your story differently. What you once called survival was, in reality, a quiet triumph. You are still here. You are still listening. Your heart is still open. That alone speaks of the battle's outcome. You no longer have to see yourself as someone who barely escaped. You can recognize yourself as someone who endured, resisted, and remained faithful through what tried to undo you. That understanding changes the way you move forward. You are not weak because the journey was long. You are strong because you stayed. You are not behind because the process required time. You are ready because you came through it with your heart still alive. The battle did not take away who you are, and that matters. Only a few people will fully understand what I am saying, and I want you to hear this without pride, guilt, or fear. This is not about being better than anyone else. It is about being ready. Readiness is quiet. It is shaped through experience, refined by pain, deepened by reflection, and formed in the moments when life stripped away everything unnecessary, until only what was true remained. Many people live their entire lives without slowing down long enough to receive truth at this depth. That does not make them less valuable. It simply means they are walking through a different season. Understanding is never given to impress others. It is given so your life can come into alignment. Truth like this requires a heart that has been softened rather than hardened. It calls for humility instead of certainty, and discernment instead of noise. Many people avoid truth because they are overwhelmed, distracted, or afraid of what it might uncover. Avoidance is often an attempt to protect a wounded heart rather than an act of rebellion. You are not here because you are superior. You are here because you remained when others walked away. You questioned instead of becoming numb. You allowed pain to teach you instead of letting it define you. Those quiet choices prepared you to receive something that might feel overwhelming to someone who is not yet ready. Spiritual separation is never about exclusion. It is about awareness. Awareness grows patiently and cannot be forced before its time. When truth arrives before a heart is prepared, it often feels threatening. When it arrives after awareness is grown, it brings clarity instead. Many people are still living through seasons where distraction feels like survival. They fill every quiet moment with noise because silence asks them to face pain they are not yet ready to carry. Constant movement helps them avoid feelings they have not learned how to hold. Asking them to receive truth at this depth would not help them right now. It would only overwhelm them. Discernment is not measured by how loud something sounds. It is the quiet ability to recognize what carries weight. And something within you recognized that weight here. You felt the seriousness of this moment without giving in to fear. That is how discernment often speaks. It does not demand your attention with noise. It gently draws your heart to pause, and you chose to stop and listen. That pause matters because it marks the difference between someone who is ready to receive and someone who is still trying to avoid what truth may uncover. Perhaps a quiet guilt has crossed your mind as you wonder why you are hearing these words while others are not. Release that burden. You have taken nothing away from anyone else. You simply walked the path before you, endured what was placed before you, and arrived at this moment one step at a time. Others will receive what they need when the time is right for them. Timing is never favoritism. It is an expression of mercy. Truth always carries responsibility, which is why it is never given carelessly. Responsibility is not another burden for your shoulders. It is an invitation to become more aware of how you live, how you choose, and how you honor everything you have survived. Many people are still learning how to heal. They are still discovering how to stand again. They are still learning how to feel without being overwhelmed. You still have growing to do as well, but you are ready to receive this truth without letting it become confusion or unnecessary pressure. Your readiness matters to me. I do not reveal truth to separate people from one another. I reveal it so hearts can come into alignment. At first, that alignment may feel lonely, because it quietly changes the way you see the world. You begin noticing things that once escaped your attention. The noise around you becomes less appealing. You no longer feel the same urgency to rush, and your heart grows more sensitive to what is genuine. That sensitivity is not weakness. It is growing awareness. Many people pass by moments like this because stopping feels inconvenient. Familiar routines feel safer than honest reflection, even when that safety is fragile. But you chose presence instead of convenience. Presence opens the heart to understanding. This message is not meant to isolate you from others. It is meant to give you a steady foundation. Understanding allows you to walk among people without being ruled by their opinions, their pace, or their expectations. You can love deeply without losing yourself. You can listen with compassion without carrying every burden as your own. You can remain engaged without depending on constant approval. As you continue forward, you may notice that some conversations no longer satisfy your heart the way they once did. Certain kinds of noise may feel heavier than before. That is not pride, nor is it distance from other people. It is discernment, gently reshaping what nourishes your soul. You are learning to recognize what strengthens your spirit and what quietly drains it. That awareness is part of what you need for the road ahead. Responsibility at this stage often looks simple. It looks like honoring what you have survived instead of minimizing it. It looks like choosing environments instead of minimizing it. It looks like choosing environments that encourage healthy growth. It looks like pausing before reacting and listening for alignment instead of chasing applause. These are not dramatic changes. They are quiet decisions that slowly shape an entire life. You do not need to convince anyone else of what you have come to understand. Truth does not become stronger because it is defended. It becomes visible because it is lived. People will often notice your steadiness before they understand where it comes from. When the time is right, you will know whether to speak or to remain silent. Discernment will guide you in both moments. Do not place upon yourself the responsibility of carrying others before they are ready. Compassion does not require overextending yourself, and love does not force understanding. You can care deeply without trying to awaken everyone at once. I will take care of the timing. You remain faithful to the alignment I am leading you into. Only a few will fully understand this message, because only a few are ready to receive it, without becoming overwhelmed. That readiness was never earned through entitlement. It was shaped through experience, strengthened by endurance, and refined through reflection rather than reaction. If His presence completes you, say, "Lord, I give you everything I am." And if this message has spoken to your heart, share this video with someone who may need to hear it as well.